All right, so I'm going to talk about how to never have another cavity again. And this information definitely should be applied to your children as well. So you might want to let your kids watch it. I have a lot of experience in this topic because every single tooth that's attached to my skull had a cavity at one time. Unfortunately, I wish I would have had this information back then. Okay. Now, the derivation of the word cavity comes from the Latin word, which means to decay. I mean, it's bizarre to me that a person would have decay in this enamel tooth, which is harder than steel. I mean, to have decay at an early age is crazy. I mean, what's going on here? It's very abnormal. So to figure this out, we need to go to the experts, the American Dental Association. Okay. So what they say is that sugary food, okay, left on your teeth are food for bacteria that thrive on this sugar that then make acids. And to prevent this, you must brush your teeth. Okay. Brush your teeth and floss your teeth. Very important. And also see the dentist on a regular basis. And they do say to limit snacking. Okay. That's good advice. And a well-balanced meal. Okay. Well, that's good advice. Well, the question is, what is the definition of a well-balanced meal? Of course, definition also includes whole grains. And they also recommend fluoride treatments, toothpaste with fluoride, and also dental sealants can be used. And that's like a plastic coating around your teeth. That will definitely protect the tooth from these acids, and also to keep the added sugar to a minimum. All right. Well, okay. Good advice. An interesting story. I don't know if you heard about this. The sugar industry created an organization long ago called the International Sugar Research Foundation. It's kind of like a PR group for the industry. And apparently recently 300 documents that were found in the basement of, I think, some university, okay, that were meeting notes and documents from this sugar industry group. And in these documents, they found some very interesting information that there was some collusion with the National Institute of Dental Health. And they came up with a plan to suppress the link between consuming sugar and getting cavities back some decades ago. So they wanted to instead push the fluoride, the dental sealants, also research in doing tooth decay vaccines. And they should focus more on the fat. Okay. Fat is the cause of a lot of these problems, not the sugar. I'm not sure if you knew about that, but that's some interesting data. So it is true that sugar and starch would be like rice, grains, corn, things like that. You know, stuff like the breads, the pasta, the cereal, crackers, biscuits, waffles, pancakes, all that. Those are starches as well as sugars. But the sugar in the starch is really good food for acid-forming bacteria in your mouth. And so these bacteria start to ferment these sugars and starches. Okay, they ferment it, and as a byproduct, you get all these different acids. Now, what's interesting about just fermentation in general, cancer gets their fuel from fermentation, which is interesting. So they literally change their way of getting energy to fermenting sugar and carbs, which is actually very, very interesting that cancer uses fermentation. Someone with restless leg syndrome that's consuming a lot of sugar and starches is going to have a good amount of fermentation, as well as a deficiency of vitamin B1. So in other words, when you feed your body a lot of starch, sugar, the requirement for vitamin B1 goes way up because you need B1 to metabolize all this sugar. And of course, I was the poster child for restless leg syndrome when I was in my early 30s. I would get up in the middle of the night and just literally pound my thighs because I had so much energy in them. Little did I know it was that Ben and Jerry's before I would go to bed and all these other carbs that was creating this excessive fermentation and this severe B1 deficiency, which aggravates your nervous system big time. Now, regarding cancer, I think what happens too is consuming a lot of sugar and refined carbs can damage the mitochondria. Okay, that could potentially lead to cancer. That's one mechanism. And then you have another interesting fermentation problem in your small intestine. When you get too much bacteria in your small intestine, and it should be in the large intestine, but if it's in the small intestine, you're going to get excessive amount of fermentation, and you're going to end up with a severe B1 deficiency, a magnesium deficiency, and a zinc deficiency, because these microbes are going to eat up those nutrients. So the requirement for those nutrients goes way up when you're getting this fermentation problem in your gut. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because it's interesting to look at these other problems with fermentation throughout the body. We need a normal fermentation in the large bowel, but we don't need this excessive fermentation in other parts of the body, including in our mouth. Now, there is some protection in our mouth against this problem. There's this enzyme called ptyalin, which the P is silent, but it's pronounced Thailand, which is basically an enzyme called amylase that helps break down this starch. And it will inhibit these acids from being produced and generating cavities. But it's dependent on the B vitamins, especially B1, which is another interesting point. And the more carbs you eat, the more you're going to be deficient and deplete this enzyme. And the more acid, the less this enzyme can be activated. It needs to be activated in like a neutral pH or slightly alkaline. And so you can even get like a little pH tester and just put it in your mouth and see where your pH is. If it's below 7, then chances are this enzyme is not going to actually work. And there's other things in your saliva that can help neutralize the acid. You have this sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda. Your body actually makes that to help neutralize the acid. So there's all these different things that people do to try to minimize tartar control, to try to minimize these acids, these acid-forming bacteria, by taking baking soda, brushing your teeth with baking soda, doing fluoride treatments, tooth sealants. All these things are just the tip of the iceberg. They're not the underlying cause. To prevent cavities, you just have to get rid of the sugar out of the diet. You have to get rid of the starches. You have to get your kids off these sugars and starches. So many people have this idea that going on a low-carb diet, doing the ketogenic diet, is just for people that are overweight. It's not really for people that are thin, like children. No, it actually is. And so I wanted to just take this example of cavities and relate that to sugar and carbohydrates, just to increase the need to go on a ketogenic diet. And I also think your kids should go on the ketogenic plan, not necessarily intermittent fasting, but definitely ketogenic foods. And the prevention of cavities is just one good reason to do it. Now, to learn about the ketogenic diet, to know how to do it, you should watch this video I put up right here.